Love to see all these shining faces. Thanks so much for joining me, guys. My name is Christina Mallon. I will be moderating this panel, really talking about the future, of disability inclusion. And, I feel like everyone on this call are probably the world's experts in disability inclusion and disability inclusion employment. So I would love, for, you guys to introduce yourselves, talk about what you do, your passions, and anything else you'd like to share with the crowd. And, we always go ladies first, but I'll go guys first. So Jim, you can go first.
That's a unique play for me. Thank you very much, ladies. I didn't mean to cut in line, as many men do. I'm Jim Sinocchi. I work for JPMorgan Chase. I'm a managing director at the firm. I've been hired there since 2016, after I retired from IBM after a 40-year career. They wooed me out of retirement to do disability inclusion. And it was quite a challenge to go through an interview process that went from, I think, 16 to almost 30 people around the world in the bank who had representation in terms of running the business. And the firm wanted to make it clear that I had an opportunity to help change the business and do disability inclusion for them in their high standards, if you will. So very proud to be here and very proud to be with you all.
Thanks so much, Jim. And we'll go next with Keah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Keah. I am a journalist, author, and screenwriter. And a lot of the work that I do involves identity. So I'm often talking about the way in which being disabled and navigating the world as a Black disabled queer woman impacts not only how I see it, but how the world sees me, and how it's important that we live in a world where we have the same opportunities as a non-disabled person, because we deserve them. And I think that a lot of times when you look at the workforce, there are so many lost opportunities because people don't look to us and our expertise because of our disabilities. And so a lot of the work that I do is about identity and the importance of representation, specifically in pop culture. I'm a big fan of film and TV, and so that's more my wheelhouse. So I just want us to be seen in our fully realized bodies as people with lives and things to offer the world.
Amen to that, Keah. And Jenny, would love for you to go next.
So what Keah said, she's this way for me. I'm Jenny Lay-Flurrie. I'm over in Seattle. I work for Microsoft. I'm the Chief Accessibility Officer. So my remit is really anything nerdy. And then, right, and I know Rebecca's a nerd too, so I feel way at home here. And also really driving disability inclusion within Microsoft and what we can do in society, really.
Love that. Thank you so much, Jenny. And Rebecca, saving the best for last.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Cokley, and I am an unabashed fan of Keah Brown. If I point over that shoulder, there is her book. Buy her book. It is awesome. You need to have it. Put it on all your Christmas shopping lists now. I have the pleasure of being the founder and director of the Disability Justice Initiative at the Center for American Progress. And what that means is we are, so far, I keep hoping there'll be more, the only political project at a think tank that centers on disability issues in the Mid-Atlantic. And so I get to mess around in electoral politics and engage with candidates and help make sure that they have disability platforms, and help make sure that the progressive community is inclusive of the disability community and that the disability community is to the table on progressive issues.
And it's so crazy when you say that, because 20% of the United States has a disability. So it's just really shocking to hear. Well, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. You guys are all my personal heroes. And, when I became disabled 10 years ago. I think a lot of your work gave me the confidence and courage to know that I can kind of make a difference and I can change, what I see, especially in media marketing with what I do at Wunderman Thompson. So, we all know you guys are extremely successful and you've had these, amazing opportunities and made amazing change. And you all have disabilities and have applied for jobs before. So kind of what is some advice you can give to other people with disabilities when job hunting and holding, HR teams accountable? Because the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is double that for people who aren't disabled yet. It's shocking, especially, when you just see the pure talent on this call. We would just love to see kind of, what advice and how do you hold, HR accountable? Want to take this question?
Sure, I'll start. Look, I think that part of it is that society is just catching up, even after 30 years of the ADA, to embrace this community. But the other part of it is that our able-bodied population really don't really understand us or know how to react to us. Some of the experiences I had, and in talking with employees that we've hired, is that they're afraid to, if you have an invisible disability, they're afraid to talk about it because they fear someone will hold it against them. And when you're in a competitive environment like JPMorgan Chase, you want to be competitive. And I've heard some people, I know some people tell me, I said, why didn't you tell your manager you have a disability so that we can get you an accommodation? And she said, I didn't want him to think less of me. And so it's the able-bodied paradigm, and I was able-bodied once. I could understand this, that puts a little tentativeness in our people who want to work here. But I can tell you this: when we hire our people with disabilities at the bank, each of them are qualified to work here. We don't hire people because they're disabled, and that has to be made very clear. And I think we have to get over the tentativeness of telling our able-bodied colleagues about our disabilities. I found in my experience that most people are apprehensive about us or even fear us because they think they're either going to be politically incorrect or afraid they're going to catch something, right? They just don't know. Should I shake your hand? Or, there was a book when I was at IBM that we were made to read when we traveled overseas, Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. How do you greet people who are different, basically? And I think that nomenclature still has to be learned at places like JPMorgan Chase and other places. And we have a responsibility, as I tell my disabled colleagues, you have to own your disability and make that person comfortable with you, because they don't know how to approach you. They don't want to be embarrassed. And most of all, they don't want to offend you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I totally agree and have experienced that. And, anyone else would like to add to that?
Hey, it's Rebecca. Can I jump in? Or Keah, do you want to go?
You're good.
I don't think it's on us to make non-disabled people feel comfortable. I think that's crap. I think it's 2020, and I think the ADA has been law for 30 plus years. I think companies need to get with the times, and we need to see greater enforcement. I think I've been told in a number of jobs, well, you just have to make non-disabled people feel comfortable around you. And maybe it's because I grew up in a family where both my parents had the same disability I did. I never saw myself or my body as anything but the norm, as anything but radical and beautiful and audacious, because that's what I saw right back by my family. And so I moved about the world in a way that, like, I'm entitled to be here. I have a right to be here. I have a right to hold space. I have a voice, and I need to use it. We might not look at employers or employees and judge them whether or not they're disabled, but having been a recruiter, I was President Obama's recruiter at the White House. I remember looking at resumes and judging, somebody went to Harvard, somebody went somewhere else. I went to a community college and then the University of California, Santa Cruz, home of the Five Banana Slugs. Best mascot ever. And that perspective fundamentally shifted how I looked at people coming in the door. I wasn't impressed if you were at Harvard. I wouldn't know if you knew how to design games and tabletop gaming for a job on financial literacy. And so I think we really have to break a lot of these paradigms that are based on notions of ableism, notions of class, and notions of elitism, and have the actual conversation around privilege and an understanding of what it is that we as disabled people get access to versus what is it we deserve access to, because we deserve access to everything, but we don't necessarily get it.
Definitely. Keah, I see you waving that hand.
Woo! A word. No, I agree. I think that for so long, I spent too much time trying to make non-disabled people comfortable and want me to be a part of their newsrooms in particular. You know, before Corona, I was just constantly told remote work wasn't possible, that I had to be in the room. There was just no way possible to put me on the staff and let me write, because that's just not the way things work. And so when Corona hit and all of these jobs went remote overnight, it would be so funny if it wasn't so disrespectful, because I think it's hard to respect places and people that don't respect you. And I think people are catching up too slowly. And I find that even though you're nice to them, it doesn't mean that you're going to get what you want. And so I understand the importance of, like, you know, being professional and being, you know, true to your work and letting that shine for you. You also have to just be honest. There's a stigma to disclosing that you have a disability. And so if you can hide it, a lot of people do. And I think what we have to do is rid ourselves of the idea that disability is something to hide in the first place. And so I do find myself frustrated with the idea that we have to somehow make ourselves, you know, palatable to non-disabled people instead of just being who we are and letting that shine through in, you know, interview rooms or even after we get the job, if we get the job, you know? So I was just going to say, I totally agree with Rebecca.
Yeah, and Jenny, please add.
I knew this was going to be a good conversation. I did. Disability is a skill, it's an expertise, it's a strength, and we are honestly all dying for talent within companies. So I think there's a massive responsibility on employers to make sure your process, soup to nuts, is accessible. And the only responsibility that I would put on a person with a disability, myself included, is to be picky who you go for and keep a high bar. If you can't apply for a job on a website, that's a problem. If there isn't information about the disability culture and the disability community on their website, and they're not showing themselves as seeing you as strength and talent, that's a problem. Now, you can then decide how you fight that, and game on. But you see yourself as the talent, because trust me, we all want it and we want to compete for you. This is a absolute expertise that every company needs if they're going to build whatever they're building to be accessible, inclusive for this massively huge community. And if you don't have people with disabilities in the fabric of your company, you are quite simply missing out. So, you're just going to build bad stuff. So we gotta change the lens. We're all competing, and I have seen that change, but yes, it's got to change more than it has.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think what's so great about inclusivity and like why I joined the board was because I never had the ability, like all I knew was JPMorgan, Microsoft. There are two companies that care about disability because I know both of you. But I wanted to, how do I know more companies? And I think what's so great is here is like companies that don't want disability inclusion don't come to Inclusively looking for disabled people to hire. And I think what's really interesting about Microsoft, and I just saw that you guys disclosed your North American numbers of how many disabled employees that you have. How did you create a culture to get people to I guess, come out of the closet? Because as Keah said, I don't know, like we're kind of before, this radical inclusion that's happened, we've been told not to talk about our disability at work.
So yes, yesterday we shared step one in a long journey that we've been on to power our own employees at Microsoft to see their disabilities as strengths, to self-identify and to share that disability. And we published those numbers yesterday. So yesterday we published that 46% have taken the survey. So trust me, we've still got a ways to go. And that 13.2% that have taken it identify positively to having a disability, which right now means that I've got a 6.1% representation in the US. Now, that's been a long journey. And I think for Microsoft, in some ways, the nerdiness helps because it's so tangible and connected to the strategy of the company. Our boss has a mission, which is to empower every person. And I think that word every is really important because that's including people with disabilities. We've got a very strong disability ERG. In fact, that's how I got into this gig, was building and chairing that community for 10 years. And so it's got, when you're building an Xbox, when you're building Windows, you've got to make sure it works, right? So you've got to have that expertise. There's beautiful connection. And over time, by reinforcing that, by making it easy, we've been able to gradually grow the number of people that have taken that step. And by the way, clicking that button is a huge deal to say, yes, this is me. But are we where we want to be? No, we've got an ambition to reflect the 15 to 20% that's out there. We're serious about that. And so this is step one for us. But I was glad to get those numbers out there.
Yeah, no, I was so happy to see that because, I mean, are you guys the first one that's ever done that? Because I haven't seen it. Really?
No, we're not. No. That's where I give kudos to other companies that have already transparently shared. And also, can I just say kudos to every single thousands of individuals here that took that step. It is a powerful step. We need more pride in identification. And so, and given that over 70% is invisible, it's really important. So no, we're not first wave, we're definitely second wave, and hopefully more will follow.
No, I hope so too. I definitely am going to try to push my company. I know we're collecting that right now in North America, and hopefully can get those numbers out soon. And I know, we talked about making sure the website is accessible. I think that's number one. If people on the phone don't know, in North America, it is illegal not to have your website accessible and your mobile app. And I think a lot of people forget about that. But would love to hear kind of like, what are some other things besides making your website accessible that you can attract people with disabilities to your company? I mean, I know that for me, it was really seeing products for people with disabilities. When Microsoft, when I knew that when I joined advertising, I wanted to make sure I worked on Microsoft because I believe in the brand as a person with disability. But Jim, kind of what are some things, why did you come out of retirement from IBM to go to JPMorgan? What was so attractive to you when it comes to disability inclusion and the opportunity you had there?
I actually told Deb Daggett, who recruited me, no. And because I was I had moved from New York to Massachusetts, and I was at a pool with my granddaughters and my wife and my daughter. And I told Deb, I'm not interested in taking the job because I just retired. And she says, Jim, just take a look at this. So I went back and went home and started talking to Deb, and I met members of the bank when they called me. At the end of the interviews, I told my wife, they asked me to take the job. Do you want to move back to New York? And she said to me, Jim, if you go back, you could help a lot of people. And so we went back. And now I'm here 4 years. I'm going on my 5th year next June. So that's why I went back. And I took my strategy that I had at IBM, and it worked partly, and I fixed what didn't work. and I brought it to Chase, and I gave him a 30-page deck, and I said, look, I will help you do this if you do it this way. If you disagree, keep my deck. I'm going to go back to Massachusetts. And they decided to keep it. And the other point that was important to me, I asked the bank, why do you want to do this? And I was told that, and when I met all the executives, I heard the same thing. They were doing a pretty good job with the other groups, women, blacks, Hispanics, and getting there. And if you've seen some of our announcements in the last week, we made another huge commitment to work with our black communities and lower income communities, et cetera, because the bank is really, behind this whole effort, and with disability as well. They said, we didn't know how to do it. Can you help us? So I decided to do what I could to help them.
Yeah.
So that's how the bank got into this.
I love that, because I think, all of our guests, it's very difficult to be an expert in the disability community. I mean, I'm always learning something. I mean, you guys are always learning something. But I think the biggest thing to hold people back is they're scared to mess up. And that's why I think we're so delayed in general in the world when it comes to disability inclusion. So I think, the first step really is asking those experts for help, because that's what I see. It's like, I get so angry when I see people who don't have disabilities trying to be, expert in it and then messing up when they could just co-create with the disability community.
But there's no straight line to this work, because the culture at IBM was different than the bank. I had to learn the culture, and I had to figure out what they would tolerate, because what they thought I should be doing based on their experience versus what I thought weren't always on the same page. But there was a lot of room for discussion where we were able to get to where we are today. And I'm nowhere near where I want to go. So, there's more to do.
Definitely. And I think it's all about also the culture at the office. I think, Jenny made that point. Keah, I know that you discussed kind of your frustration with why couldn't you work from home before? And I think things like Microsoft Teams definitely helped to that transition to allow working from home. But kind of what other changes do you want to see in addition to work from home kind of stick post-pandemic?
Ooh, that's a great question.
What would you want?
I want to see, you're right. I do want to see it stick, because I think it's important, because we're missing out on so many voices. My hope is that it's not just a phase in general. Like, I think if you know that remote work is possible because of a pandemic, that should allow you and your hiring team to realize how many people you're missing out on in the hiring process at all, because you want them to come into your office from 9 to 5 every day. I would really like to see companies expand their idea of what disability is and can be. Oftentimes when we look at like ads and things, or we see one disabled person in like on the front of the company's website, they're often always white. They are wheelchair users, and they are often men or like some racially ambiguous person. And I think the problem that these companies have is that they'll put one of us on their website or in their company, and they'll say, I'm done, box checked. But I think they're erasing so many people within the community. And I think if you're really about change, it has to make sure that it's change not just for white disabled people, or not just for wheelchair users, or not just for people who use canes, or people who don't use mobility aids of any kind. Like, it needs to be change for all of us. And I think my hope is that companies don't just take this as a thing, as a box to check, and keep the work constant. So what I want to see is people showing up, really, and not letting it be a one-off thing where like, we gave you 2 people, like, you have everything you want now, like, what more could you want from us? Like, keep going. That's really what I want, is people to show up and really commit to doing the work.
You want people to show receipts.
Yes.
Totally one Instagram post about how you support disability is, needs to be backed up with a lot. And Jenny always pushed this on me. She said, there needs to be measurement. There needs to be measurement on everything. And I totally agree. And Rebecca, I would love to kind of know more about, in your role, how are you guys looking at intersectionality? Because I feel like, everyone is fighting for representation. They're fighting for dollars. They're fighting, for their causes. But how, from a government standpoint, are you guys looking at intersectionality, and how do you see that happening with employment?
The first thing I want to say is, while I'm really excited about the increase in telework, I do want to make the point that I'm really also fearful that when things go back to, and I hate the term new normal, to whatever it is, that telework isn't used as an excuse by companies to avoid making accommodations in their workplace. I don't want to see telework become the justification for segregation of disabled employees, because I could really see companies be like, well, you know what? It's so great. You did such a great job teleworking. We're going to get a new office space, and now we don't have to make it accessible because you can just work from home. And so I think it's important to be really mindful of that. I think when we talk about intersectionality, and Keah's going to laugh because she knows exactly where I'm going. A lot of times people in the disability space, and frankly, white people, because I'm just going to say it, white people, use intersectionality to talk about diversity. And it's not diversity. Let's put some respect where it belongs with Dr. Crenshaw and talk about it in the context of compounding oppressions and how racism and ableism might play out differently than just racism or ableism separately, how sexism comes into fold, how xenophobia and homophobia, the conversation around intersectionality that we need to. It's very clear that this current state of the federal government is not talking about intersectionality. They're actively trying to remove all conversation around critical race theory, around diversity and equity. I know a number of people emailed at the president's executive order canceling all events tied to critical race theory and diversity and inclusion, included ending. And frankly, it shouldn't, that there is the need to further this conversation. The federal government itself is the largest employer of people with disabilities in this country. But we're also seeing, if you look at the data, disabled people are leaving the federal government is supposed to work through the Schedule A hiring authority. And so something that was actually designed to work really well, the administration is actually using it throughout the last 2 years of the administration.
Well, hopefully things will change in the next 2 weeks. Fingers crossed. I see that, Keah. I mean, yeah, it's the government. Being a U.S. citizen, we do have lots of protection compared to other countries and regions. But I do, sometimes there's lots of work to do. I totally agree. And I think, it's interesting because we have a lot of companies on here that do get government subsidies, do work with the government. Would love to get your take on it, Rebecca, on why isn't disability hiring mandatory? And do you think that is because I know in Brazil, you have to hire a percentage of people with disabilities. And kind of what's your take on that from a government? Because I know that any company that gets money from the government are encouraged. But what do you think about making those rules stricter? Or do you want to maybe explain that to, the crowd?
And time again is really enforcement, because the U.S. is one of the countries that doesn't have a requirement. We don't have a set of quotas. Japan for a long time was really lauded for their system, but then it turned out that they completely baked all their numbers. And so like they would hire people right ahead of the count date and then let them go. And so there's been some analysis done between countries that actually have standardized quotas and countries that make recommendations or make it easier for folks to hire. You know, I think it could go either way. I think there's benefits to actually like having a number. But at the same time, let's also be real. Like a number doesn't matter if those people aren't getting retained, promoted, and professional development opportunities. I mean, one of my favorite questions to ask people when they brag about like how great they are at hiring disabled people is, how many disabled managers do you have? Oh, I see that your company sends people to Six Sigma training. How many of your disabled employees have gotten to go to Six Sigma or Rockwood or any of the other major professional development organizations? You know, how many, like, what is the pipeline? Is there an actual pipeline, or is it just good enough to hire us? Because I'm not interested in the latter, I'm interested in the first.
I definitely agree. And Jim, you know, you're in a senior position. You know, how or what kind of programs or what kind of culture can you create so that more people with disabilities do move up the ladder? Because I think sometimes when people do, it's like, well, you know, we're just happy to have a job and we're scared to push people to challenge us. And unfortunately, I don't feel that way, that, you know, I'm just lucky to have a job, but I have heard in the disability community, especially with talking, you know, different candidates coming to inclusively, that they're scared and they just don't want to ruffle any feathers. And kind of how did you get there? And give some advice to some people on the phone now.
That's so true. We face that at the firm in terms of, well, one of the issues I have is the identification of people with disabilities is so strict to protect us that it makes it harder to identify people. So although I've extended hires to over 4,000 people in my last 4 years at the job, it's hard for me to track them because the data is held so tightly. And I have talked to the OFCCP to give us some latitude so I could find people with disabilities who I can give developmental training to in leadership positions. In my view, I think people with disabilities that are out in the workplace and active are pseudo leaders because they have to get through all the challenges of being disabled, and yet they're doing jobs that many people didn't think they could do. And I have a number of friends, as you do, that are great, you know, strategists, technologists, mathematicians, writers, etc. And that's breaking through that is difficult. And, you know, I work with my government programs people and a few other people to try to get us the latitude. So we are all worried about being abusive to people with disabilities and holding them back, that sometimes those rules prevent us from getting ahead. So that's something we struggle with all the time.
And Jenny, it would be great, you know, as an executive yourself, to kind of understand, you know, with those rules and play with the government and things like that, how are you guys creating a culture and you yourself kind of being able to jump on that ladder and move up? Because it would just be really interesting to hear, because I haven't heard too many stories of executives with disabilities, or at least ones that are out of the closet, I guess you could say.
I think there's a lot more out there when we realize that's definitely been the case. And forgive me for going back on a couple of things here. Because I have a disability doesn't mean that my ambition is any less. In fact, in many ways, my ambition is more, bluntly, because I see so much opportunity that there is to have representation and to drive change and to make societal level infrastructure just move forward. I think the key principle is to have the door firmly wedged open, not closed. And there are things that companies can do to close that door, consciously or unconsciously. You know, we learned that with the autism program, bluntly, which is one of our dedicated talent programs, right? Get after talent with autism that's got a significant bar of STEM education, science, technology, engineering, math, but was being underemployed, right? The resumes were often gappy. We're going into roles and positions in companies that were under their bar of employment. I've seen candidates with data science, computer science degrees, but working in stacking shelves. That's underemployment. And that some of that was on us because we were putting candidates through traditional interview processes, which if my kiddo who's over there doing a flute lesson, which you may be hearing, as one kid who's autistic, if she was asked standard interview questions, she would bomb out, right? They're just way too gray for her brain and her skills. So you got to wedge the door open. We don't do that anymore. We bring folks into an academy. And I think one is just, we're human and we can bring incredible skills back in. So it is making sure that you're going through methodically everything that you're doing. And I will say one of the other things we posted yesterday was actually a page full of stories of some of our employees, many of them way higher than me. There's a great guy, Chuck Edwards, who shared his story at the Ability Summit earlier this year. He lives with MS. He shared that. We got it down and plenty more to come. Because actually, I do think there's way more out there, and it's on us to make sure that we educate people on those and people see those role models. I don't want people to stop at my position. I don't want people to have to think they have to go accessibility. They go do whatever you're good at. And trust me, my path, I have a music degree, people. It doesn't. Game on. You don't have to. You just follow what you're passionate about and go for it. And if you've got blockers, let's tackle them, right? And really, that's what accommodations are there for. They're to clear the way so that you can go and achieve whatever you want to.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's tough. You have to see it in front of you. And I definitely, me coming out about my disability and really, you taught me kind of how to push people, and you just have to ask the questions and you deserve it. I think that's really amazing. And we need more senior leadership to come out. And I'm excited to read more of those stories this weekend when I get a chance. It's so necessary because, some of the best inventions were created by people with disabilities. Some of the richest and most and smartest people in the world have disabilities. And I think it's a huge media problem. I think we don't see, we see disability in one way. And we need to change that. And I think all the work you guys are doing are really good. Keah, I would, because you are the most amazing writer and I'm some fangirl of all your stuff, I would like to, we have over 300 people attending this call, and I know they're going to want more information. What are some more books or movies or things that you think that people, because not everybody, has a lived experience of being disabled, or myself, I have ADHD, as you guys can probably tell. I, have dual arm paralysis, but I don't have the lived experience of being deaf or having a visual impairment, or, what are some more books or articles or things that people can just kind of immerse themselves? Because, as Rebecca said, it's like, it's not really our job to figure it out. We need other people to figure it out. Yes, no matter what company you're in. Jim, my husband's in finance, and he can barely get off for my doctor's appointments and things like that. So I think some cultures are definitely harder than others to fit in. But would love just like some more resources, Keah, because I feel like, I stalk you on Twitter, and you always have the best content. And I would just, let's share that with the crowd, because I feel like every time I meet someone's like, well, no, I just haven't been exposed to it. And they probably have.
Yeah.
It.
Right. I think that's what you said is so right. Like the media representation of disability is part of the reason we are where we are today, and that's not far at all. I highly recommend watching Crip Camp on Netflix. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I would recommend reading Alice Wong's Disability Visibility anthology. It's so good. I mean, I'm in it, so I'm a little biased, but it's so good, and it just really talks about like across the board people with disabilities from them, and I think that's so important. I mean, there are other shows too you could watch, like Special, that's also on Netflix. That's Ryan O'Connell's show. I really like the arc of Garrett from NBC Superstore. I know that the actor himself is not disabled, so there's a problem there. But I do really enjoy the way they write him. I really think that to find more disabled people is to look in hashtags like mine, disabled and cute, or Crip the Vote. There's just so many. Of course, I'm blanking on any others right now, but there are so many hashtags that you can follow and find disabled people to learn from, but also I want to keep in mind that like disabled people aren't just there to teach you. Like we're people first. And so you can learn from us and read books and stuff, but I think you need to also be clear that our lived experiences trump what you think you know about disability. So, there are hashtags online. There are so many books, but I highly recommend Disability Visibility by Alice Wong. And also Sitting Pretty.
Yeah.
Definitely, it's so good. So just really do the work. If you're looking for a place to start, honestly, just go to Google and and type in like disabled voices, or even if you go specifically on things you want to learn about, like disabled people who write. Or I just wrote this piece for the New York Times called Disabled People Love Clothes Too, talking about the importance of accessible clothing. As you know, Christina, you were in it. But I just think that all of it's out there. You just have to go looking, and it's okay if you mess up. We all make mistakes. I think that, like you said earlier, people are afraid to try because they're afraid to mess up, but that's what life is. And you can't go through it keeping people out because you're afraid of what you might say when they're in the door.
That's really helpful. And Jim, any kind of resources or kind of what kind of knowledge besides your own personal knowledge kind of went into your framework at JPMorgan? If there's any books or articles that people can refer to, or just for you.
I try to keep up with stuff. I had Judy Human at our firm a few months ago. We promoted her book at the firm. I do recommend Crip Camp as well. I think it was one of the best movies I've seen on this topic. And we have, one of the interesting things is that we have a rich communications team that promotes disability inclusion at our bank. And, we're a bank, we're kind of financial people, we're kind of staid, but they're very interested in things that are different. And last year we had 300,000 reads on our articles on disability inclusion. 300,000. Now, we have about 260,000 employees at the bank. And what we've been doing is running profiles of people who volunteer to tell their story about mental illness, their disability, their promotions at work, what they do. And the firm has really embraced that. And that's 300,000 hits, which was just phenomenal. And I know I don't have 270,000 disabled employees. So, those are the metrics we do. We did 20,000 accommodations in 3 years, including ergonomics and technology accommodations. We have a real estate, Rich. Every time we build a new building, I get to see the plans to make sure that they're accessible for our folks, or when we do renovations. We also have a policy letter signed by the chairman and a standard that's in the business that covers managers who want to hire people with disabilities. And one of the reasons for doing that when I got there was to make sure the business was steeped formally in disability inclusion. Like, the standards don't go away. Our company's run by rules and regulations, and we're in there. And we have to, every year we update them to make sure that they're current. We've hired about 30 people on the IDD spectrum, and we may do at least 500 more in the next few years. So those are our intellectual disability folks. We have over 200 people hired on the autism spectrum at the bank. And for me, a win was one of our autism managers just got promoted to an executive, which was great. It was like the first one I've seen. But that's the goal. Slowly but surely, we're trying to make progress in an industry that's known to be difficult for anybody to survive and work as hard as they do. And so all of our people, again, I emphasize, they're doing the jobs they signed up to do, and they do it with help or without help, but it's just nice to see. It's more than nice to see. I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, that's so exciting to hear. And, you know, I think a lot of the times it really is about putting the frameworks in, and, you know, really just accommodating with what the ADA says you have to accommodate with anyways. And, you know, Rebecca, kind of when you look at the ADA and you look, that's kind of giving you a rule set, but are there other things outside of kind of what the ADA that you think that can make a better, more progress within a company that you don't see there that they might miss? Because I feel like sometimes checklists or things like that, when you look at the ADA, it's sometimes not specific enough. And would love if you kind of think like, what would be the best, most inclusive scenario? If you could have your dream world, what would it be? And what would in your dream workplace?
Money. Like
Money. Okay. Get paid.
money. Like most visually conscious in the world.
Yeah.
I worked for a company, like, and my husband told me I need to stand up and show you guys what I'm wearing because he says that he thinks everyone thinks I'm wearing a leopard print onesie, but I'm not. So it's a dress, but whatever. From Matrushka in Los Angeles, who I love and has amazing models. I just have to say that.
Okay.
But one of the things that I learned from my time at Victoria's Secret that I still use today is that people want to be talked to. People want to be sold to. And my attitude as I moved into management with the company was, we have a responsibility to make everyone's day. And so my stores were some of the most diverse stores in the company. I helped manage the San Francisco market. And that was a commitment we made. We wanted people to walk into our stores and hear at least 10 languages spoken at a given point in time. We wanted ASL present on every shift at our stores. We wanted folks from the trans community, the disability community, folks that you wouldn't expect to work at a Victoria's Secret because we were the San Francisco market, and damn it, we were going to be the best market out there. And because people will spend where they feel comfortable. People will spend if they see people like them. Let's be real. And honestly, in that job, if you can say the word décolletage without blushing, you can sell legislation. And so when people ask me what I learned to be so good on public policy and how I have no shame, like going up and approaching Ayanna Pressley outside of her office building, it's because I used to sell lingerie. I can talk to anyone about anything. Like, I have no shame. There is no filter. Keah knows this. And so I think one of the things that we can really do that really matters, and I was purposeful in mentioning Representative Pressley, because she's the 88th generation of Congress. She is now out as a disabled woman of color in the hall, a disabled Black woman in Congress, as is Representative Katie Porter, who is outspoken about having a speech disability. They're ours. Like, I don't have to sit and wait for the old white dudes of the 60s and 70s to come and save us with legislation. We have disabled women in Congress, including those two, including Senator Duckworth, that are doing it for us. Disabled women are doing it for us, and they do it. They are out because they saw disabled women on the internet talking about their experience. They followed Crip the Vote. They saw 12 presidential candidates write disability platforms, and they picked up the phone and called our offices and were like, hey, let's play together. I don't have a disability platform, and I'm a member of Congress. What do I need to do differently? Because we stopped being ashamed. And I think that's one of the most powerful things. Like, we don't need to sit and wait for legislation to save us, because I can tell you, in this Congress, it ain't saving us. Yeah. We're not going to be saved by a magical bill. We're going to be saved by each other. And so thinking about what is our own personal charge in these spaces, I love, and I don't get to see Jenny nearly as much as I want to, because we're both so busy doing the things that we're doing. And so honestly, my big incentive for doing this is like hanging out with Jenny. Because there aren't a lot of women at our level in our spaces. And so getting the chance to like sit and kick back and like know that she's thinking the same thing I'm thinking, which is which one of our kids is going to interrupt this panel first? Because I'm watching my 2-year-old flirt with it, and it's a whole mess.
Bring it in.
But like, that's the thing. Like, yeah, I love it. Like, legislation isn't going to save us. The ADA isn't going to save us. White dudes in nice suits on Capitol Hill are not going to save us. Who's going to save us? It's the people in this room. Like, we're going to save us. And it's by grabbing our swords and taking the hill.
I totally agree. And I think, with inclusively, that was, so many nonprofits were kind of handling get the jobs for people with disabilities and blah, blah, blah. We need to take a business approach, because you're right. Government is not going to save us. We need to go together. And Jenny, I see your hand up.
I do. Well, one, I needed to visually describe what I pointed at, which is my 2 sleeping dogs behind me, and they seemingly are staying asleep, so we're good. And UPS truck will hopefully not arrive in the next 10 minutes. But there's another one that I think that this is why I love that. I don't think it's got anything to do with lingerie, by the way. I just think you got this. I think the other side of things, while we go power up the voice of disability to take us forward with legislation, is also to lean far more into the voice of customers. Any company, any nonprofit should be doing that, and making sure that voice and that feedback is coming all the way back into whatever you do. And I think there's, I always say law is not the goal. I don't goal any product team here to go and achieve just compliance, just the law, because that will always be behind the use of technology and the use of that product by people with disabilities who are constantly problem solving and innovating. Go listen to that voice and bring that feedback in, and let's make sure that whatever we do is productive, effective, useful, if not opening the door to things that could have been closed. So having the channels where you have feedback coming in. Honestly, I have a disability support team, disability answer desk, which we call Dad. No, Mom, Dad. And I get 15,000 calls a month into that environment, hopefully powering people up to fix whatever issue they may have, whether it's Xbox, Windows, whatever it may be. But it's also gold dust, because I'm getting feedback of, hey, this is not as good as it needs to be. Let's go fix it. That's feedback that can help make your environment better. Make sure that anything and everything you're doing is open to all channels, and open to the disabled voice.
And more innovative. I mean, text messaging, email was all created with the disability community. So the number one thing I hear every business like, oh, we need to be more innovative. We need to be more innovative. I mean, here's the key to unlock it right now. So I know we have about 5 minutes left. So I want to open up, is there any, thing that I didn't cover that you kind of want to say, or, you have audience of 300 plus people, feel free to kind of just say what's on your mind or things you think they need to hear.
I'd like to say that we have an internal captioning team too. So we have people that serve the population, and we're currently doing the United States, England, and expanding to APAC and then LATAM. And so the firm stepped up and did that, which I thought was just terrific to do. So we have the bases covered, but we're not perfect, right? There's more work to do. And it's as you all know, it's taking too much time to get this thing done, but we're pushing through it.
Always a maturity model. You have to start somewhere. And I think, time will show. And I'm excited to see more of what JPMorgan's doing. Anybody else?
Can I say two quick things? One, follow everybody on here. I've been gently stalking all of you for quite some time. And Keah, you included, my dear, in fact, quite a fierce way. So keep posting, keep stalking, and supporting one another in this community. I think it's so important to do. And the other thing I wanted to say, honestly, was at you, Christina, because you're a force of nature, my dear. And I just have to say a deep gratitude of thanks for, pulling us together, but also you're the next generation of bold leadership in disability and accessibility. And I'm just excited to see what you're going to do, and game on.
Listen, you guys are kind of the reason why everyone says like, oh, like if you could fix your arms, would you? I wouldn't, because literally my life has been just so much happiness that like my husband's like, should we get another bedroom here? Because all you want to do is work because you're so excited about it and you're waking me up. And thank you guys, so much from the bottom of my heart. I'm so excited for the future, and we have about 2 more minutes left. So would love to open up again to the floor, whoever you want to add.
I just want to say,
Go.
Oh, go ahead. Okay. I just want to say that things like this are the very reason why I get so excited about the future, and I get so excited about what we can all create when we, use each other and we talk about these things and we have these conversations, because like, this is going to sound so silly, but I have been for the past couple weeks inundated with like those Nintendo Switch ads. And I was like, I want to buy one, but I want to make sure that it's accessible. And I talked to like 10 people just from tweeting about it, who talked to me about how accessible it is and how I can make it work for myself. And I'm like, now I'm going to get one. And I think that network of people and having spaces like this, having spaces like this is so important, because we're not alone, and now we don't feel alone. And I think for people that are watching that are disabled and have not yet disclosed, I promise you that like, even though it's not a perfect community, there's so much to be gained by being who you are and saying, hey, I'm disabled too, because you get so much out of it. Like, before I ever learned to love myself, I learned to love people like Rebecca and Alice Wong and Melissa Thompson. And I think it's so important that people understand that they're not alone in this, that we really all have each other. And if they're looking for, people to lean on, this community has so many great people in it, and just to keep going, and that it's not as impossible as it seems sometimes.
Yeah, if I may interject one point that moved me, besides Rebecca's little one there. I got a letter from a mother after she saw a story on one of our disability inclusion features with my service dog, Veronique, who passed away last year. And the little boy was about 6 or 7 years old, and she read the story to him. And at the end of the story, when she saw the picture of Veronique and I, the mother wrote to me, my son, Jim, after seeing your story, said, Mom, does that mean I can go to work someday? Because he was in a wheelchair. And so this is the humanity behind it. It's the business is important, but not as important as the humanity, where we give others hope to achieve beyond what we all have done. And that would keep driving me in this place.
Well, that representation matters. It's so important. And thank you so much for joining and really kind of, this has been amazing, National Employment Awareness Month. Like, just give a round for yourselves. If I could clap, I would. Karen, unfortunately, but thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. And yeah, please follow all of these people, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. They're just a wealth of knowledge. And enjoy the rest of your night, guys. Bye. Thank you.